All right, let's take a closer look now at some of the stories that are catching our eye in Behind the Headlines. Ping-demic is a new word that's sure to enter the Oxford Dictionary. The Financial Times says more on the economic problems that's being caused here in the UK after 600,000 workers were ordered to self-isolate by their COVID-19 apps. The Telegraph's headline says the French authorities have told Britain they will not stop migrants at sea, despite receiving $74 million from the UK to combat illegal channel migration. The Tokyo Olympics, as we've been reporting, has been beset by problems. The Washington Post has more on yet another scandal and resignation to hit the event with just hours to go before its opening. And as Mother Nature hasn't helped until now, Dubai has come up with its very own way to create artificial rain to bring down the heat there. Nigeria's national daily newspaper has more on that story. Well, to discuss all of these stories, I'm joined now by the French-Algerian journalist Nabila Ramdani and author and broadcaster Gavin Esler. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Nabila, just explain to our international viewers what the ping-demic refers to.
Well, the pandemic hasn't gone away, and now we have a ping-demic, and technology has, along with vaccines, always been seen as the key out of this health emergency. But the COVID app that so many people have signed up for now seems to be out of control. And its aim is to warn people that they have come into contact with the disease and they should isolate. But now there are record numbers of people hearing the dreaded ping, and many of them are shop workers and indeed healthy and fit ones, and their absence from work. They're absent from work because of self-isolation, and it's leading to empty supermarket shelves. And I think that most of us have noticed an absence of products that we would normally take for granted, and the situation could get far worse if the authorities do not get a grip on this app. But beyond shop workers, there are lots of essential workers, such as waste disposal teams and HGV drivers, who are getting pinged as well. And this has just as serious implications.
Nabila, have you been pinged?
No, you know what? I haven't used the app.
Gavin, have you been pinged?
No, I haven't, but I was telling a friend I was coming on the program to discuss this today, and she said that one of her friends was pinged while already self-isolating at home. He hadn't been anywhere, and then he realized he lives above a pub. And so somebody in the pub underneath his flat must have been tested for COVID, and he was pinged. One of my daughters was sent home from school last week early because someone was pinged who was, I think, a supply teacher who had popped in for a short time. So it's obviously wise to take precautions, but this is going a bit nuts. It's causing problems for the economy, and also it means that people are losing faith with the test and trace system, which has run into a lot of problems in Britain.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are suggesting is a big problem. If you lose the public trust, then you sort of lose the momentum of trying to beat the pandemic, Nabila.
Yes, and I think what is certain is that a lot of people who are pinged are not developing symptoms because they are young and fit, while others have been double jabbed. So anybody who works in a shop, a restaurant, or a cafe is, of course, going to come into contact with hundreds of people every day. And this is another reason why the ping system is so unsatisfactory, and that's why the British government needs to act fast to sort out the situation. And it's yet another example of their derisory performance, one that seems to get worse with every passing day.
A lot of people have been switching off the app or deleting the app and switching off their Bluetooth. Gavin, have you been tempted to do that?
I haven't got the app on my phone, so it's not going to happen to me.
OK, let's move on. The migrant crisis. Gavin, you've been in Dover this week and seen the situation firsthand. Tell us what's going on down there.
Well, it's extremely busy for Border Force. There's been lovely weather here, and the sea has been a flat calm. It is one of the busiest sea routes in the world, so these people are taking their life in their hands simply coming across here. It's better than the winter, because in the winter, many of them, especially those traveling with children, suffer from hypothermia. I've talked to people from the Border Force who say, you know, some of these 3 and 4-year-old kids on the sea are in a really bad state. But all that just speaks to the desperation of the people trying to get here. And I went past one group who were being held by Border Force. They were waiting for a van to take them away. These ones were all young lads, I think, from Sudan and Somalia. They looked really sad, but glad, I suppose, to be safe, at least on land. And the real core of the problem isn't this British-French row about who should do what to whom. The problem is there is no obvious legal route for people who wish to seek asylum in Britain. So therefore, they come on the sea and they take the route that they're taking. And it's very difficult to stop them, because there is an endless supply of people in from Iran, Iraq, from North Africa and elsewhere who want a better life. And, you know, I find it very difficult to blame them, although the system just means that people are putting their lives at risk.
Yeah, and Nabila, of course, always, you know, what seems to get lost in this war of words is that it's the most vulnerable that it affects.
Yes, indeed. And sadly, the saga of migrants from all over the world wanting to get to Britain from France had dominated the news agenda for at least 2 decades now, and the details never seem to change. Successive British governments have tried to throw money at the problem, and now we have a notoriously anti-immigrant conservative government doing the same by giving the French millions to try and keep the migrants in France. But the reality is that France does not have the power to stop all these people traveling where they want. And as Gavin quite rightly said, intercepting small boats at sea and trying to deter all those on board from traveling somewhere else is particularly dangerous. And it's always far easier to allow such travelers safe passage and then to deal with their cases when they reach destination. And in purely legal terms, there is no legal basis for the French to intervene, even when migrants are in French waters. And now we have a right-wing government, basically, in Britain. To be more specific, the current Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is somebody to appear completely oblivious to such facts, or indeed the basic facts of international law. And she's notorious for blurting out populist right-wing headlines in the hope that she will impress her key voters. But she proves time and time again that she has no idea how to deal with problems in the real world.
OK, we could talk a bit more on this, but we must move on to the Olympics. Gavin, have you ever known an Olympics like it before?
Well, this is incredible. I mean, I loved the 2012 Olympics in London in normal times. It was a great celebration of all that's good in the world and a lot of things that are good in Britain too. Things have obviously gone really awry. I mean, I feel sorry for the Japanese government in the sense that coronavirus makes it almost impossible. What do? Do you cancel the world's greatest sporting event, or do you go ahead with it when it's going to be really difficult? So they're going ahead with it. But to be honest, the way in which some of these officials has behaved shows up a certain section of male Japanese culture in an appalling light. I mean, we've had one guy who's had to quit because he made ridiculous jokes about the Holocaust. We've had another one who had to quit because he made jokes about the size of a woman. I think she's a singer, and he I won't say what he called her, but it was quite rude. What is it? The creative chief or the head of the organizing committee and so on. So they have compounded a difficult situation by having people in charge who seem to be utterly out of touch with any kind of empathy about how they look across the world. And I feel sorry for the athletes, because the other thing is, if there's an outbreak of coronavirus in the Olympic villages or however they are, then it will be ruined, unfortunately. I hope it's not.
Yeah, I mean, Nabila, do you agree it was a poisoned chalice from the start, but maybe the Japanese authorities could have handled it a bit better?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, usually the Olympics are a time of great international excitements and indeed global idealism, but not this time around, I have to say. Not only the coronavirus pandemic has robbed the Games of its key ingredient, which is humanity, and that's to say that it's not just spectators which are being forced to stay at home, but also many of the athletes themselves, either because they have been tested positive for COVID or have been pinged. And now we have the Japanese organizers of the Olympics firing the opening show's director over past comments about the Holocaust. And of course, anti-Semitism is something that has plagued the Games for decades, right back to the Berlin Olympics, when teams from all over the world were saluting Adolf Hitler. And it's absolutely right that there should be zero tolerance towards anti-Semitism. And it's outrageous that someone of this kind of record was selected for such an important job in the first place. But I think, the game are also looking increasingly more and more discredited, and there are plenty of people who are now calling for the Games to be scrapped altogether. I have to say, a very sad statistics I saw, however, was that 70% of Olympic athletes only get to appear in one Games. So if these Games are cancelled or indeed discredited completely, then that's their big chance gone.
Yeah, I mean, will you still be watching, Gavin? I mean, how bad can it be? 2 weeks of the best sportsmen and women at the top of their game?
On the other side of the world with a huge time difference, I think I'll watch this, but I won't be
replay.
I'll watch the edited highlights, I suspect.
Just lastly, apparently it's so hot in Dubai that the government is now paying scientists to make it rain. Nabila, how are they going to go about doing this?
Well, they're using, technology is always the key to these stories. And I have to say that beyond being absolutely astonished by it, I actually find this story about Dubai making its own rain pretty sinister. It has an awful, brave new world feel to it, one in which mankind plays around with nature in an attempt to make the world better suited for humans in the short term, while causing huge problems in the long term. And in this case, the so-called enhanced rain is created using a drone technology that unleashes electrical charges into clouds in order for them to clump together and thus produce rain. And it's not science fiction either. Monsoon-like downpours have now already been created to order. And of course, the kind of 120-degree Fahrenheit droughts that the UAE experiences during the summer months are horrendous and not in the least bit desirable. But that is clearly, and so there's a positive reason for this artificial rain. But again, I am really worried about the general precedent that is being set and where it all might lead. What does humanity use to sort out nature effectively? I mean, surely this whole argument is what climate change is all about. It is effective.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of that, Gavin, tampering with Mother Nature?
Well, to be honest, there's nothing new in it. I mean, climate change is one issue, but the first cloud seeding took place in 1946 in America. A guy called Vincent Schaefer started to do it, and they've used rockets, they've used aircraft. I think the only thing that's new about this is they're using drones. In the 1950s, the government of Thailand did it. So there's nothing particularly new about it. The problem is, of course, that we may need more of it in some places, and obviously less of it if you look at the weather pattern in Germany and Belgium, unfortunately, with these poor people who've had their homes destroyed and sometimes their lives taken because of too much rain. But cloud seeding itself is a kind of, I mean, it's an 80-year-old technology. It's not that unusual, and it's not surprising, I suppose, that in Dubai and Abu Dhabi in particular, they would be thinking of this.
I mean, they can have some of our rain here in the UK. I will happily give it to them, gift it to them, I will. Thanks to both of you for joining us on the programme. That's it from Behind the Headlines.